Right, everybody, thank you. The hour being after 6:30, I'd like to call the Tuesday, July 26th, 2022 School Building Committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is to acknowledge public participation. So let me read this statement if I could. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and state of emergency, on March 12, 2020, Governor Baker issued an executive order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. On July 16th, 2022, Governor Baker signed into law an act related to extending certain provisions of emergency accommodations, which, among other things, extends the expiration date to March 31st, 2023. Citizens with questions or comments can email mmortali@walpole.k12.ma.us or middleschoolproject@walpole.k12.ma.us. Our next order of business is approval of meeting minutes. Anybody have any questions about the minutes? Hearing none, I take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Barrett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Gaositz. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Frisha.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan.
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz.
Yes.
Dr. Goff.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Conroy.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Dr. Hahn. Dr.
He's
Hahn,
away.
on? Okay, very good. Mr. Senek.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor, I don't believe is here either. And Mr. Jack Fisher. Mr. Fisher? Jack was with us. Did we lose him?
Yeah, it looks like we lost him.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Okay, very good. And I vote yes. So it is a vote. Did I miss anybody? All right, it is a vote. Our next order of business, and this goes over to Compass, is the vote to approve the pre-qualification subcommittee. So Chin or Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Kate, do you want to walk through that in terms of who are the membership that is proposed?
Sure. So we were looking to roll into the trade pre-qualification committee, similar to the CM selection committee that we did for Fontaine Services. So currently proposed is Don Anderson, Jack Conroy, Jack Fisher, Jeff Fisher, and then a member from Tpo and Compass. And Fontaine will also be involved on this committee as well. So the commitment is basically, we have a scheduled kickoff meeting that's penciled in for tomorrow, but then after that, it would probably be, every other week going forward. So we do have multiple packages going out, but we are looking to pre-qualify all of the trade contractors at one time because we are able to hold until the final bid docs are complete for the final package in December. But prior to that, we're looking for the RFQ to be going out, in the next week at some point, with qualifications due around August 17th. And then we'll start reviewing those package with biweekly meetings.
Thanks, Kate. Do we have any questions or comments about the membership of this subcommittee?
I have a comment, Mark.
Yes, Jack, right ahead.
Kate, I can't do it. I actually have a meeting at the same time tomorrow, so that'll be the kickoff. I can't participate.
Okay, I know that Jeff Fisher also has a conflict tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Do the rest, but just tomorrow happens to be.
Okay, and we'll be sure to email, all the documents out along with minutes.
Any questions or comments? Any other questions or comments?
Mark, can I just ask, the purpose of this subcommittee is to pre-qualify who?
Subcontractors, I believe.
The file submit contractors. And that's which is represents roughly 45 to 50% of the cost of the project.
Okay, just wanted to understand what we were voting on.
Yeah. And this is a required step under public procurement regulation for public construction, that for the project of this size that we have to pre-qualify the file subbid contractor. And this is a process that we have to do before the before going out to bid.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the membership of the pre-qualification subcommittee.
I'll move.
I have a motion from Ms. Gaositz. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Barrett. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Senek.
Yes.
And is Jack Fisher here yet? Is Jack back? Not yet. Okay, and I vote yes, it is a vote. Our next order of business is a vote to approve the payment of utility company back charges for the relocation of the electrical service in the amount of $51,441. Again, this is Compass, so Kate, Ken, or Brian.
Yeah. So normally this would have been folded into the vendor invoice package, but this one is somewhat a little unusual because this came in very late and that we were not able to do that. But however, this is something that's related to the relocation of the electrical work for the summer, and that this is basically the Eversource's back charge for their portion of the work for this project. And this would be a payment that would have a check would have to be cut by the town to pay Eversource for them to come out here to do the work. And so this is the and then what's on the screen is the invoice amount. And we are looking for a approval for this, and then separately we'll be looking for approval for the vendor invoice.
Do you have any questions or comments about this item?
Can I just ask, Mark,
Yes, Nancy.
is that a reasonable amount of money? I have no idea, but is that the dollar amount that you were expecting?
I'll answer that. We do anticipate an amount of somewhere in this range, and then this is a line item in our budget. We anticipated that, and this is this came in the range that we expected.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Jack.
It appears we got to pay them up front.
That is true. Utility company doesn't give you a whole lot of choice.
I know, but what I get concerned is, and you see it on all the streets, is when they go to do a road, moving telephone poles takes forever. Is there any guarantee these guys are going to come in on time?
I think we have Fontaine Brother on the call. I would ask Griffin or Joe, can you tell us where we stand with the utility company right now?
Yeah, so obviously no guarantee when you're dealing with utilities, but they've assured us that they're going to do the best they can. We anticipate that the pole work that we need to get done this summer will get done, and we think it'll fall in line with our schedule just fine.
And Joe, am I correct that well, at least I can state that the accompanying this invoice is also their I'm going to roughly call it a scope of service outlining what they're going to do, and that was already been reviewed by the team, and then so that's what we anticipated.
Right.
So Chair, if I could just jump in too, I just checked with Jody. That's standard practice with Eversource. They make us pay for all this upfront as much as she doesn't like it. And they've never not provided the service. We also have other ways if they don't follow through in terms of police details with all the work going on here. So if there's an issue, we have some other ways to leverage things.
one more question, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Is there anything on the poles other than Eversource?
The answer is yes, there are other services that will follow. For instance, that the town fiber would be following the same route. And basically that the first step is basically get the pole relocated, and then everything else can follow in terms of the data and fiber.
Is any of that like FiOS or anybody, or is it ours?
The fiber is ours, and then we already in contact and then made the arrangement to make to have that work done as soon as the poles are done.
So
Okay.
Jack, this isn't a straight pole relocation. This is actually adding some poles to temporarily reroute the service around the construction site. So it's not like we're transferring to new poles and have to wait in line for all of those other vendors.
Okay.
And also all the work are on our property. We're not on the street for the first portion of the work.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I would accept the motion to pay the utility company.
So moved.
A motion from Ms. Gallivan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Gaositz. Let me pull the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Senek. And is Jack Fisher back yet?
Yes,
And Mr. Fisher, your vote.
yes.
And I vote yes, it is a vote. Our next item of business again is Compass, the vote to approve the vendor invoice package for June. So again.
Yeah.
Chin, Kate, Brian.
I will take that. For June, the invoices for month of June consist of Compass's payment and Tpo for their work, and including the hazmat. And then there is we also had the first payment to Fontaine, rather for their Fontaine for their pre-construction service, and the amount total amount is $365,673.50. And the invoices have been included in your package. And this is the signed this is the signed requisition approved by the Tpo and notarized and all that. And so that's the payment request, and then we're on schedule in terms of the budget for this portion of the work. Any questions?
Yep. Any questions or comments about the vendor invoice package? Hearing none, I would accept the motion to accept the vendor invoice package for June.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is that from Mr. Barrett?
It is.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Ms. Gallivan. Let me pull the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes,
and I vote yes, it is a vote. Our next order of business again is Compass, the project status update.
So there are two portions of the status update. One is the 60% CD that we have the draft, we have the estimate, and then we have draft value engineering that we have reviewed. That was that we will be reviewing that with you today. And also that I really shouldn't say review finishes, but rather the finished boards are delivered to the town hall, and then Tpo will get into that a little later in the meeting. And we will review the VE list, value engineering list today with the committee. And then, but the vote and the approval is in our next meeting 2 weeks from today, and then we will be with a VE list that get us on budget, that we will also be seeking for approval for submission to MSBA, and then as well as the approval for the finishes on August 9th. And then after that, we will on the 15th, that we will submit the package to MSBA, and as well as issuing the early release package number 2 as well. And then on August 23rd, we'll be coming back to the committee to seeking the review and approval for the cost of the early release package number 2. And the schedule right now, this is an updated schedule that here we are here on the for the 7/26 meeting, and then there's some minor changes to the dates here that later that we shifted the release day of the early package number 3 a little bit in order to make the schedule work for everything. And then the work has been started on site, and I'll let Kate do the following 2 slides.
So Fontaine mobilized.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt?
Yep.
We have a Phil on the call. Could I ask Phil to identify himself? Is Phil still here, or did he drop? I guess he's not here anymore.
So you just dropped, Mark.
Okay, very good. Sorry to interrupt, Kate. Go right ahead.
No worries. So Fontaine mobilized on site July 11th, and they got right into the retaining wall at the existing Bird School. So they had cut the brick on either side of the retaining wall, removed the long side of the retaining wall, and then shortened the courtyard and installed blocks, and then there'll be a fence on top. So the new retaining wall is installed, and there will be an egress stair that is currently being engineered that will exit out where the brick is in the middle of that picture for the next school year. In addition, the tree clearing started and is ongoing. It's substantially complete at this point. So the trees were cleared to the limit of work, which included widening the Washington Street entrance. So the pedestrian walkways have been blocked off, and we really haven't seen that many walkers since the pedestrian walkways were blocked. And in the lower right-hand picture, you can see that was where the existing oil tank was underground. That was removed successfully last week, and there was no issues with that removal, and the grade has been replaced.
Any questions from committee on the progress on the site or the progress of the project?
And the trailer showed up yesterday, Kate?
Yeah, so now we have the 2 trailers on site. They're tucked, you're entering Washington Street right along the trees to the left. So we get furniture tomorrow, and we'll be having, Compass will be working out of there, and Fontaine's on site full time. So any questions, you're always welcome to come into the trailer office.
Mark, can I just ask a question?
Right ahead, Nancy.
You might be getting to this, but how and where will students enter the building this fall?
This fall, they will still enter at the front. The 2 entrances are the entrances are not changed. What will happen is that right here, that in front of the existing gymnasium, or right around this area, is there will be a new drop-off loop created, and then a walkway from here will be connecting to the existing front door. So there will be slight change in terms of traffic. Well, not slight, but there will be change in traffic pattern. However, the front door and the way you enter into the building does not change.
Okay, so that retaining wall area that you're talking about does not become an entrance to the building?
No, this retaining wall, the only reason this is in place is that there is an exit down
Yeah.
below from the cafeteria out. And
Yeah.
we do not wish to change the exit pattern of the existing building. And then so we took out the existing stair, and we will be relocating a new stair will be built at the end of this right at where the arrow is. And then that would lead out, and then was a path to get back and get away from the building, so that there's no change in terms of the egress pattern in the existing building from the inside.
Thank you.
No problem.
Mark, I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go right ahead, Ellie.
So with the new traffic loop for cars, I'm assuming that there's a new walking path for the substantial amount of walkers to Washington then?
Yes, that also gets relocated, and then that at the moment I do not have what the traffic pattern will be, and both for traffic and pedestrian for the opening day. But that was all in the plan that Fontaine had proposed, and then they will execute that. And then we do not see, at the moment, we do not see any reason why they cannot finish that work by the time the students show up at the end of August.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else, Kate?
No,
I think, yep,
All right.
we're good for the.
So our next item of business is a review of cost estimates and value engineering. Still Compass. So Chin, Kate, Brian.
Sure. I'll get started on this, and then we'll go into details. So the cost estimate that so the construction budget is $92,599,826 was what was in the construction budget, and then on top of that we have an unused pre-construction fund of $135,000, which so what's available to go into construction cost right now is $92,734,826. The estimate came back at $96.2 million. So we do have to make up the delta of the nearly $3.5 million, a little shy of $3.5 million. And then so that the team, and then when I say the team is that this is Fontaine, Tpo, and Compass work together to come up with a list of the possible VE items here along on this column. Here's the description, and then this is the value. And then Tpo had gone through the list and then look at it, and then the highlighted item are the recommended item, and that I am going to switch to a share with a different spreadsheet so that we can see it a little bit better. You should be able to see that right now, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so here that, and I'm going to let Matt, that if you want to start going over the item by item in terms of why the recommendation and some of the reasoning behind what we are doing.
Yeah, I'll go through each item. I guess we'll go, we'll do the exterior and then take questions, and then interior and so forth. So, everything on here isn't pretty, but it was, what we came up with between Tpo, Compass, and also Fontaine. So I'll quickly go through each one, and then we can take questions and comments after we go through each item per each section. So the first item we looked at reducing was the main entry canopy.
Matt, just before you get, can I just jump in before you get going? So we reviewed this as well with the working group, and the goal as it was last time with value engineering is we're trying to not impact the general size of the building. We're trying not to impact the programming and educational spaces as far as being able to deliver the program. So we're really trying to pick around the edges of the building as much as possible. I think you'll see also that looking at some of the site features while keeping some of the key aspects of the building that were designed and shown to the public, as well as some of the nicer features such as the exterior amphitheater, but we'll get to that. So the goal for tonight, and I know you'd seen this list previously, in a draft form. This has been somewhat revised. It hasn't changed all that much, but again, the yellow items are what we've gone through as a team and also with the working group. And we feel, are recommending them for approval, but obviously looking for feedback. And the goal is not to vote on these tonight, but to come back at the next meeting on the 9th after everyone's had a chance to digest this and kind of do a final pass through. We do need to get to that $3.5 million number, which doesn't leave us a lot of wiggle room on this list. So keep that in mind. But again, we're trying to take some things that, pick around the edges as much as possible without really getting into the core spaces or core features.
And this list is also kind of ongoing from their previous round during DD, where we had some of these items that were rejected or deferred. So we added them back on the list and kind of reviewed that with the working group as well. So continuing on, we looked at the main entry canopy. That was a big dollar value. We decided to only reduce it by half. So it'll be half the length that it currently is. So basically we'll either have it out front at the curb going halfway back to the entry, then it'll be open to you get to the actually entry vestibule, or we can flip it around the other direction and have it closer to the building and have to walk from the canopy further to the kind of drop-off loop. But that came in at $150,000. One of the items that was suggested by Fontaine was switching from the TPO roof to PVC. That is typically a PVC roof has been more expensive in the past, but with the current state of affairs and economy, the subs are actually offering a credit to use the PVC due to lead times and installation, and that came in at a cost of $140,000. I believe that actually has a longer warranty, if I remember correctly, Chin, to what we currently have for our TPO warranty. We have on the list here reducing the brick veneer by 50%. That is an option that we currently are not pursuing. We also looked at changing the metal panel to brick with light gauge backup. That's another one. It's a small value item. And we also had to think about additional steel that may have to be added if we're changing from brick to or metal panel to brick or a CMU backup. There's a small canopy that reaches out from the community entry. We actually have an overhang there at those doors already from the floor above. That was a decent item where we figured we could pick up some costs. So that came in around $60,000 between eliminating the steel, the metal panel, and also the plumbing for the roof drain and roofing on top of that. Reducing the area of the curtain wall at the main entry. Again, this is a prime area that we're trying not to reduce a lot. It has a lot of natural light. As you'll see in a few weeks in the updated renderings, it's a very nice looking space. So we're trying to limit as much of that reduction as possible. But we took I think I have like a 25% reduction there, which gave us around $25,000 credit back for that. We had some pole banners mounted on the exterior of the building for kind of decoration and some signage. We reduced that and eliminated for a $13,000 credit. We had a reduction of window at non-classroom areas. We kind of picked it up a little bit further down. We're trying not to touch any of the classroom spaces to keep all the natural light in that, but there are some areas where we can do a reduction, and we'll get in that further down the list here. We have a precast sills at all of the windows currently. We have an option where we can remove those precast sills and only provide a metal sill extension underneath. That was a $50,000 savings. We have some kind of decorative brick and CMU work where we're pulling the brickwork in and out about by an inch offset to kind of give a little decoration and depth and shadow to the facade. Removing those gives a $50,000 credit. Changing curtain wall to brick and light gauge backup, 25% is another $28,750 credit. Here's the window one, reducing windows to CMU light gauge framing, reducing by 300 square feet. Again, there's areas where we have offices or we have some windows in the cafeteria. There's a couple windows we had in the back of house spaces. So we're looking to reduce that and save $11,700. We will not be eliminating windows from, all office spaces will still have windows throughout the building. Damp proofing at the foundation wall, we're going to reduce that to one side only. That's a $25,000 credit. That wasn't one of the items that we had previously on the list, but we deferred. This is another one that we had on the list previously, changing the studs to 6-inch, which requires a heavier gauge and will also require some changes to the insulation. That was another item that we deferred from last time, and that's approximately $100,000 savings. Deleting 50% of the skylights and adding roofing. That's kind of, we've got a skylight into the alt PE space. We'd be eliminating that skylight. And then there's another skylight into the cafeteria. We'd be reducing the size of that. That came in at 82.5. And then finally, a reduction of the polycarbonate around the top of the gym. It currently wraps the entire gym. And we took a 25% reduction there and changing it to CMU. That came in at 38,762. Any questions on any of the exterior items before we move along to interior items?
I just had some comments here. It's kind of hard from this list to see. I mean, I know you said like the PVC roofing, that seems like one that's easy because normally that's more expensive. I guess like I'm having a hard time knowing what's going to actually change the building and change, you know, it looks like we're eliminating lighting, we're eliminating certain design elements on this. So I almost would like to, you know, work on this a little bit and prioritize certain items. My thought is that you're not going to be able to add in certain of these things later. Like for instance, that offset area that looks pretty on the building. Once you build the outside of the building, it's either there or not. And, you know, whether or not we want that, you know, we still have to decide, but there's certain items that if it's possible to add things later, like I would prioritize keeping the building as much as we can intact and reducing things that are not going to make a big difference in terms of the visual look that we've designed the building with. And then, you know, if there's things we can add in later, like, not that it's ideal, but like bleachers, because once you know, reduce the size of the front canopy, you're never getting that back. Once you start taking, just because it's the front of the building, students are going to be there, it's going to be very difficult to change that. So I think for me, my brain is just saying like, I would like to prioritize items that can be added in later that wouldn't affect the structure of the building.
Yeah,
one of the things that we haven't really discussed yet is the possibility of making some of these alternates. And again, as you discussed, we can make these alternates, and as the pricing comes in, we can look at accepting the alternates, or where you talked about having deduct alternates as well. So that's one option that we discussed on how to keep these things in. But what we need to kind of think about is how the building is getting built and the order is getting built in. So like you said, anything structurally, if we remove it now, hard to add it in the canopy. So based on what you said, we kind of started that discussion, and what you talked about is kind of what we're here to talk about is what we want to keep and what we want to prioritize and how we prioritize the alternates going forward, because we need to make an order for the alternates, because you need to accept them in order that they are in basically in the spec. So that's something that we do need to think about moving forward. Kind of once we get this sorted out, we can then look at what we want to keep as alternates in the project, that, you know, if we do have money later on, it can get added back in.
And I will say that the list used to contain more reduction, and Tape has been pushing back in terms of taking too much out of the project. But I think that it just that the overall reduction that we do have to take some of it out of the exterior. And it may be better, it may be worth the time to go through the rest of it, see what else is also in the mix. And then from there, then we can prioritize what are the items that we consider taking, and then in what order. If there's, I don't know if there's any more question or discussion on the exterior of the building.
I had a question more about the windows. In our current buildings, there's often rooms that do not have a lot of windows that, you know, 30 years after the building was built are really needing to be utilized. So the windows, you mentioned that there's still windows in offices and things of that area. Do all the rooms that are within this building have windows to the outside?
Anything that's kind of like an occupied space, yes. There are some windows that we had like in the back of house where we had a storage room or a trash and recycling room, where it was nice because it looked nice for the facade and the layout to kind of get the rhythm down, but they're not really needed on an everyday basis where there's not people, in there sitting and working. But yes, all the offices have spaces, windows, all the classrooms, all the special ed, basically any occupied space, I think at this point has windows or overhead, vision panels into it from the exterior.
And Matt, am I correct to say that all the teaching stations have exterior windows? Am I correct on that statement? All the classrooms?
Yes,
and
all classroom
the,
spaces, yep.
right.
All classroom spaces, the teacher
special
planning,
ed,
yep, correct.
Special ed and science and music and course, all of them have, and we do not, none of that is on the list.
Correct.
If you actually look at it very carefully, it says that all the window reduction are going to take place in the non-classroom area, and that's and we'll be asking Tpo to utilize their design judgment to manage this.
So I'm just really thinking 25 years after the building's been built, the spaces without windows would not be transitional spaces that could be utilized in other ways.
I don't think that, Matt, am I correct that the plan is?
Yeah, there's not many. Most of those that don't have windows are kind of in the back of house area where it's kind of outside the teaching zone. For the most part, everything in part A and part B, which is all the classroom wings, except there's like a mechanical room. Every space has natural light and windows coming into it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple comments.
Me too, after Jack.
Go ahead, Jack.
All right, question. I believe I mentioned this before. I don't know if it's on the plans, but over at a job in Brookline, they eliminated all the wire mesh and the slabs on deck, and they went with fiber mesh. Saved some big bucks for them. Has that been talked about?
I don't think that's currently on the list, but we can add to it.
I mean, if you can substitute that, it doesn't affect your building at all.
Understood.
Right.
I think Tpo will vet into that and look into that and then come back with an answer. Definitely by our next meeting. Yes.
Yeah, they seem to do it all right. Now, you guys are talking about putting alternates in the bids, and then naturally, you're not holding off the alternates, correct? You're gonna have to sign the guy up right away with the alternate in there.
Correct.
Depends on what item, because majority of, say, exterior building envelope, that is something you either take it or you don't. You don't. But there are other items that say that, just for argument's sake, if it's a interior tile, you have a little bit of time that even if you don't take it on day one, you might be able to negotiate that scope of work back into the project if you have money.
Yeah, but
Jack, are you asking if it's all going to be in the drawings and specs?
Well, my point is, especially filed sub bidders, is you're gonna pick it, the horse is out of the barn at that point. So you have to go with the low. So you have to decide, are we just going base? Or
Right.
Base plus alternate. So you don't have any time. There's no negotiation, nothing. I just want to make that clear, is you're off and running. So
Yeah.
so all your filed sub bidders, which included the painter and the tile guys, you're stuck with what you got.
Yeah, I hear you saying, Jack. I don't, for tonight's conversation, I don't think we should muddy the water with alternates yet. I think that kind of discussion is a little bit farther down the line. I think there's some items in the project that when we get closer to putting together a final number, that we might want to consider to become alternates to give us some flexibility with the overall budget. But I think for tonight, it's really about what's on this list. I thought Jen made a good point of, when looking at this list, what can be added later in the project, so to speak, versus what's maybe one of the first things you do or one of the more permanent things that you do. So that's a good way of looking at it as well. But I would suggest that tonight we kind of just stick to the general list, so we can talk about alternates later.
Last question is, I assume we're at the no turning back size of the building right now?
That has been the overall goal, yes. I don't think we can get much tighter with the size of the building.
So what I'm saying is you get to a point where you can only value engineering so much, and then all of a sudden you start lopping off a few square feet here and there. But are you at that point? I'm asking that. Is this job at that point right now? It's proceeding at this?
Well, I think we should look at the whole list because that there are items on the list that are that has not been taken and that are more than $100,000 so single line item. So at the moment, I would say that we still have few more things before we get to the point of taking reduce square footage.
And that may actually happen. That may actually happen a little bit with changing the stud size. So it depends on which way we move that and which location based on the structure of, we may actually pick up or take out some square footage with that change from going to 8 inches to 6 inches as well.
Yeah, gross not usable square footage.
Right.
Yeah.
However,
correct.
it does not change any of the interior space at all.
Correct.
That I want to be clear on that.
And to Jack, to your question, I mean, the goal of this exercise and the recommendations is to not, and we didn't do that with the first round of VE, like that would have been a more advantageous time to look at square footage, but I think the goal here is to actually get the square footage that the program needs, with some of these selections being things that could be potentially come back into budget if the budget works out, or when you have potentially to add them back in the project throughout the course of construction. I mean, some of these things are on the list will be one of the last things that the project does. So I think the goal is to go through these types of lists and not go after square footage.
Okay. Well, Brian, the reason I bring that up is just the Norwood report or whatever the other day is you guys involved in the Coakley knocking out 50 seats in the auditorium.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Incorrect.
The guy got it wrong. He's gonna reissue.
A guy get it wrong?
Yes.
He did. We didn't eliminate seats.
Where'd the 50 come from then? How did he get that?
It was entertained.
That was an option that was declined. He wasn't even at the meeting.
Oh, okay. Because I saw that and I said, wow, that shrunk.
Yeah, we saw first thing. We're like, you gotta be kidding me. So fake news, Jack.
Yeah, no, that's not what.
Anything else, Jack? All right, and I think you were next and then Nancy.
Item number 14, changing the studs to 6-inch. You've mentioned that a couple times, but I'm not all that familiar with construction. So I understand you were going from 8-inch to 6-inch. That doesn't seem like it would impact the style of the building any, but can somebody explain that a little more?
So basically an 8-inch stud, when you make it smaller, you need to go with a heavier gauge. So basically you're using a smaller stud, but it's a more robust stud. So basically all you're changing is the depth of that stud. So typically we do the 8-inch studs because that's kind of, it works well. It allows the insulation that we need with the bat without having additional spray foam and stuff like that. So once we go to the 6-inch stud, you pick up a little bit of space, you save some cost, but you also have to look at the envelope itself and how having less insulation in there is going to affect it. So I believe, based on speaking with Edelman and Lelick, who's doing our energy model, we may need to add some spray foam into there in order to get the same quality envelope that we're currently maintaining with the 8-inch stud, since we have less airspace. So that's kind of the change. It's really just the change in the depth and the change in the thickness and gauge of the studs.
What exactly does gauge mean? Sorry.
Gauge is basically the thickness of the steel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nancy, any questions?
Yeah, a couple. These are more big picture questions. I want to understand where we are with contingency money. I went back and looked at when we were explaining this to the public. Lots of people had questions about how are you going to stay on budget? And between us, some of it is Walpole and some of it is, I don't know whether it would be Tpo or Fontaine, but there was $19.9 million of contingency money in addition to 4.6 million of market escalation. So tell me, I get that this is not an exercise that we want to do. Nobody's happy about it. The market is crazy. I get all that stuff. But where are we with the contingency money in particular, the $19.9 million?
Shin, do you have those numbers?
I don't remember off the top of my head in terms of number, but I know that we have a 5% contingency for construction costs and then 1% for the owner's contingency. So it's a 6% for something, 6% of the $92.5 million. That is the project contingency that's in there. And earlier on in the project, that what we have is we carry a higher design and escalation contingency. And so basically what that means is that earlier on when the project is less defined, not as many things are drawn on the drawing, that we carry basically a lump sum money for what is not shown on the drawing, but we believe to be there. And then that number gets reduced as the drawing gets more defined and then more details on the drawing. And the same thing with escalation, as the time between the estimate and the actual start of construction or midpoint, I forgot which one they use, that duration, the duration of the escalation becomes shorter and then therefore reduced. And so right now that we still carry a design contingency and escalation contingency at about $4.5 million out of the $96.2 million in there to absorb for the two reasons. One is that Tpo has not finished their drawings, number one. And then number two is that we still have an escalation between today and the start of construction. So that's there are many factors in there. So that, and then in the $96.2 million number also included a 1.5% number, which translates to roughly $1.5 million of the CM contingency that's not in the 5% and 1% that we were talking about earlier. And so the 5% construction contingency is still in the budget, and we do not wish to touch that this early in the game, because if you do that, then you would, we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, shall we say.
The ER packages are also helping us with this, because the ER packages, we actually have, things bought out and actual prices. So the ER1 package, we already have that number in here, which kind of helps reduce the contingency and escalation and risk kind of that we have of what's still out the bid. And with ER2 about to go out, Fontaine also has some numbers back on those items as well, kind of pre-pricing it before the actual bid documents go out. So that's reduced the we calculation as well.
So let me see if I can restate what you were just saying, that as the architectural designs and the early release packages go out, you dip into some of the contingency because you have more realistic numbers to work with. Is that right?
You have more certainties to the estimate that you have that you're doing, so therefore you don't have to carry as much design contingency.
No, Nancy, you don't dip into the contingency. So what happens is, when we were getting ready for town meeting, we were only at schematic design. So we had an estimate based on, kind of square foot costs of the building with very little detail.
Yeah.
So the estimators estimate what they estimate what they can see and what they think things are going to cost, but then they add in 10% of construction costs for a design contingency for stuff that isn't designed yet. So in theory, as the design becomes more defined, that 10% is reduced because you're actually pricing more things more definitively with the estimate. So, the cost that they're able to estimate goes up, but the design contingency comes down, and the goals at the bottom line is still your 92.6 million. So what's happening here is we're not using that contingency. It's being offset by what's actually being priced, and the price has still come in slightly higher. So we still, in the budget right now, we still have about $3 million or $2 million of a design contingency for things that are still being designed that the estimators can't see yet. But that initial number that we talked about, that 19 million, that was made up of a couple different things. It was made up of things like the design contingency. It was made up of the contingencies we have during construction for change orders. Because I think the discussion at that point was, how do you keep the project on budget from here to the end?
Yep.
So that 19 million was the design contingency, which was almost 9 or 10 million at the time of town meeting. A couple million, $4 million for the escalation in pricing at the end of the year. And again, we saw a massive spike at the beginning of this year, which we dealt with at the last estimate, even more than what was anticipated at the end of, at the town meeting time. And it also includes almost $6 million in contingency during the construction phase. So we still have that in the budget. That's the 5% that Chin referred to. That's for change orders during construction. And we have an additional 2% owner's contingency for things that come up during the design phase and or construction for soft costs. So we're trying not to dip into those contingencies now while making the building as efficient as possible, cost effective as possible. That could be a conversation as we get closer to the end of the day with any final VE. Do we want to potentially reduce contingencies as we have more certain costs from Fontaine and some of those early buyout packages? That might be an option. We're just not recommending that now because we'd like to maintain as much contingency as possible for the construction phase.
Okay, that's helpful. I remember that there were different components to the contingency total that we came up with. And I just wanted to be sure that we're all in this in terms of, that we're not leaving money on the table, that anybody is going to be able to grab.
Nancy, we lost your sound and your camera.
Fontaine or Tpo or Compass isn't going to get rich while we're cutting costs. And you explained that. I get that. My other question is about change orders. So suppose we go through this list and we cut all these things that are recommended, and we decide that some things fall in our favor. If we wanted to restore, like, let's just say 5 of them, do they become change orders after a certain point? And when is that point?
Brian, do you want me to answer that or you want to answer that?
I can do it. So
Okay.
if we do the next estimate and we, are flat, or we maybe pick up some budget or some other things that we could potentially reduce that doesn't affect the cost of the building, and we are able to add them back in at that time, then they're added back into the design and they're in the budget. If we finalize the design and get the bids and finalize a guaranteed maximum price with Fontaine saying, here's the scope that you're going to build, and we start full on construction, and then we decide to add them back in, then yes, then there would be a change order at that point, and we'd have to review them as a change order. They come out of owner's contingency. So that's a fine balance between maintaining your budget and adding something later that'd be kind of more of a nice to have versus an absolute necessity. Like we'd want to balance with what those things are that we were hoping to pick up on a change order at the end of the job. Like if we want to expand how much tile we do, like that might be something you want to do as a change order versus something that's a little bit more critical that you don't have it on day one versus having on day one. We might want to try to get that in during the design phase. Like I would recommend trying to get those things in during the design phase.
And if you had to estimate, when is that date where we would have to sort of make a do or die decision?
It'll be when we finalize the bid documents, if it's related to any of those trades that are going to be bidding on them. And then it'll be, again, the non-trade subcontractors, think of like drywall or the landscaper. That'll be when we finalize the GMP and when we finalize buying them out with Fontaine. So we'll have a little bit more time with the non-trade subcontractor scopes of work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The questions? Otherwise, we'll turn it back over to Matt. Matt, do you want to continue?
Thank you. So moving on to the interiors, we have acoustical deck in the auditorium. That's a premium for that deck. So that was a $50,000 credit, but since we're going to have to add some more acoustical treatments into that space, otherwise you will have a very loud and echoey gym. We only took 16,667 of that. Changing the aluminum glass folding partitions, that's in the classroom wings at the end of each kind of corridor, in the middle of classroom wing A. That allowed kind of the spill out into the corridor to kind of allow that space to open up and expand into corridor space. Instead of having that as a glass folding partition, we're changing that to a glass wall with doors. That was a $75,000 change. Removing the enclosed tack boards. Those are basically the tackable surface that's in about a 4-inch deep case in the corridors, kind of to meet the fire department's needs for hanging stuff in the corridors in the enclosed space. That was a credit of $20,000.
Matt, excuse me for a second, but there are still other display units in the project, even taking this, right? I think there's another item in there. We did
Yes,
not
there's
take all.
correct.
There-
There's
we-
another item down below for the large kind of display cases.
Right.
We did a 50% reduction in the vinyl wall graphics. That was a $45,000 credit. One of the items that's on here is reduction of lockers. I think there's another one further down the line of complete removal of all the lockers. That is one that we're not proceeding with at this point. It was not going to be probably too much of a cost savings, since once you remove those lockers, you then either have to put up some sort of tile or paint the walls. So currently we're not proceeding with that option. We are looking to reduce the tile by 30% and use paint instead. That was a $335,000 credit there. We are not proceeding right now with the further reduction to 50%. We are not removing the diffusers in the auditorium to keep the kind of the sound that we need for reverberation and echo and everything else to get quality sound in the auditorium. We're leaving that. Reduction for the line set electric at the stage. We are currently not pursuing that item. AV and rigging. We're assuming a placeholder of $100,000 for that right now. Curved walls in the toilet rooms, faceted instead. We are currently not taking that item. It was pretty small at $20,000. This is a large one that we're looking to pursue, is removing all the sinks in all the general classrooms. It will remain in the SPED classrooms and also in the science classrooms, but removing them in all the general classrooms.
And the art classroom still has a sink. These are just regular
Correct.
classrooms, but the specialty classrooms, the sinks remain.
Correct. That was $160,000 savings. Signage reduction was a $10,000 savings. Remove and reduce acoustical wall panels. That was a reduction, reducing it by 2,000 square feet, saves $60,000. Removing auditorium perforated sound panels in their entirety. We didn't take this credit since we are removing the acoustical deck. There's a line item further down where we're changing this out to a less expensive wall panel option. Replacing the epoxy flooring with quartz VCT. That was in the bathroom areas, and that due to maintenance, we did not take that. That was a $120,000 credit, but we figured Donnie would not be happy with having the quartz VCT in the bathrooms. Here's another one, deleting display cases. This was one where we're reducing the larger display cases. That's a $29,000 savings. Removing the tall casework cabinets. We're going to remove one from each classroom, or the general classrooms, which was 36 of them. That was a $54,000 savings. Removing composite wall panels, CMU. I think this one's in the wrong category, and this one was, I think we had up above that we weren't going to follow that item. Reducing the gyp wallboard ceilings and leaving painted exposed structure, reducing it by 1,000 square feet was a $25,000 savings. Deleting the 50% of the acoustic ceiling clouds. Those are in the breakout spaces in the corridors. Reducing that was a $7,000 savings. Removing 50% of the linear wood ceilings. That is in the cafeteria, and then we also had them in some of the corridor spaces. Reducing them by 50% was a $16,800 savings. Deleting some of the ceiling reflectors in the auditorium. Again, we did not reduce that, remove them due to the sound quality in the space. Installing standard VCT in lieu of quartz tile. Donnie asked for the quartz tile, and it's a kind of a maintenance issue. So it is a cheaper product if you go with VCT, but more maintenance is required for polishing and stripping. So we did not proceed with that option. We currently, I lost where was that now? Network switches. That is not, that one we are not currently proceeding with. That is an option that we're looking further into, so we'll keep you posted on that. Deleting the water booster pump based on where we're at for the sprinklers and also the plumbing coming into the building. This was a placeholder, but now that we have the testing of the water line into the building, our engineers are completing their calculations now. They should have an answer to us by the end of the week, but they are pretty sure that we can eliminate that booster pump and eliminate $45,000. We looked at eliminating all of the side lights into the classroom doors and science prep rooms. After talking with the working group, this was one that they did not want us to proceed with. Again, this was what we talked about earlier, elimination of the lockers. We did not proceed with that. Eliminating of the bleachers. That is another one that we're currently not proceeding with. Reducing tack and marker boards in the classrooms. Again, we decided not to proceed with this one because this one directly affects your everyday classroom and education. So we did not take the $50,000 credit for that. We currently have shelves for hydroponics in all the science classrooms in front of the windows in every science space. Eliminating them is an $18,000 savings. We also have some glass-faced wall cabinets in the science classrooms. Eliminating them to just wood doors is a $15,000 savings. Deleting one general storage cabinet from each of the STE classrooms on the first floor was a savings of $4,500. And then doing the same thing in the science classroom, or also in the science prep, which is on the second and third floors, was a $9,000 savings. Moving on, in our spec, there was a custom color noted for the epoxy countertops. That's something we haven't typically done in the past. We either use the gray or a black, which was a $30,000 savings. Deleting each teacher wardrobe unit has a file drawer in it currently. If we remove that file drawer, it's a $7,400 savings. Next one's a bunch of millwork stuff. Is deleting the wood bench. We got a tiered kind of concrete wood bench with steel plate under the stair and in the cafeteria. Removing that is a $15,000 savings. There's another wood bench outside of chorus. Removing that was $3,000 savings. And then there's another piece of millwork in the media center for the circ desk. And we're going to pull that out from the millwork package and purchase that during as part of the furnishings package, which is a $4,500 saving. We had on here was another option from our hardware consultant, was going non-proprietary for the door hardware, but we want to keep this right now based on the standards of the district so that all the locks here kind of match what is elsewhere in the district. Reducing specialty ceiling, that is a $40,000 out of work further to see reduce and still not affect any of the reverberation or sound requirements that we need in that space. I'm going to kill my video because it says I'm getting an unstable internet, but I'm still here. Moving on, this is reducing the cost of the acoustical wall panels in the gym, going from metal face to fiberglass is a $30,000 savings. Replacing elsewhere in the job, we have fabric covered acoustical wall panels. We're looking at a cheaper option for that, which will have approximately $10,000 savings. At the main stair in the lobby, kind of that connection piece that you see as you enter the building, we have a bunch of guardrail there, and that's kind of open to the floors below on the second floor, third floor, and then also on the second floor, the cafeteria. Reducing some of those railings and making them half high chip wall board walls is $15,000 savings. We looked at the option of removing the accordion doors and replacing them with fixed glazing and doors. Based on our conversation with Fontaine, they thought that was a minimal savings based on the fire ratings and everything else that we need to maintain there, so we did not pursue that item. and reducing the interior glazing. We don't have a ton of that right now, so that was another option we did not take at this point. The next couple items here that you see in orange are reductions that are to the food service. And we kind of are picking that up further down at line 69. The district is providing us with some additional funding to buy the equipment for that central kitchen. So we were able to get a savings there of, is it 133,000? I think we got it down at the bottom, Chin, right?
So what happened here is that because the funding comes in, we're not we're purchasing the same kitchen, but the funding is coming in from the district, so that there is a line item of 104 that we added the funding for $350,000 right there. So that's what's that's why we're not taking a credit here.
Thank you, Jen. There's also an item in the documents right now that we had to, that the MEP and FP subs would have to pay for their trade fee permits. We're going to reduce that. We talked with the district and talking with the town, and that's an $80,000 savings. We have another item here where we're looking at reusing some of the existing furniture, student desks and chairs from the existing, both the existing middle schools, and then pulling some of the casework out and moving that into the FF&E package. Some of maybe the tall teacher storage cabinets or wardrobes we can buy as furniture that's on wheels. And that was a savings. We have a kind of a plug there of $246,000. There was a line item in the spec for a batting cage, which we do not have in the project. So that was an $8,000 savings. We talked about the kitchen equipment already. We talked with, this was from Fontaine. They proposed eliminating the water heaters in Part D of the building and going with the instant hot units instead. And based on talking with our engineer, that was something they did not recommend. It would have been a lot more maintenance for Donnie, and they've had issues kind of making this change in other schools. So that was something we did not pursue. And then finally, we looked at eliminating the entry grills and changing them to walk-off mats in both of the entry vestibules at the community entry and the main entry, which is a $30,000 savings. Any questions on the interiors?
And so you can see that even though the total items is actually $3 million, that the recommendation right now is actually only half of that in terms of the dollar amount for the interior portion of the walls and finishes. Shall we move on to the next set of items?
I think Jen has a question.
Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to check on removing the sinks, since that's a fairly, large dollar amount. Does that have an educational impact if we remove the sinks in the rooms? I know you said you wouldn't be removing in art or in science. Removing those elsewhere, is there a real use for sinks in other classrooms from an educational standpoint?
I don't think so. Most of the time, the sinks get used either as, a lot of times we'll have them as either a bottle filler or additional spot where you can fill up your drinking water bottle at, or for typical hand washing. But a lot of times I don't know how often they get used in the general classrooms. I think it depends on the teacher's curriculum. I think since we have these specialty spaces, as with the tech classrooms and the art classrooms and those sort of spaces, that I think more of the educational value is there than in the general classrooms.
Matt, we're just going to make sure, I agree with, depending classrooms. I mean, yeah, we'd like sinks in the general class, all the general classrooms, of course, but, it's hard. We've got to cut, somewhere. As long as you mention the science classrooms, the art classrooms, but also the special education program rooms.
Yes, we have them in all the spaces still as well. Yep.
Yeah, this line item only apply to those interchangeable general classrooms.
Matt, continuing, I guess.
Okay, moving on. We'll go through the next next two altogether because they're short. Security, we looked at reducing the interior cameras by 50%. We currently did not take that item. There was another item for reducing the exterior pole-mounted cameras, and we did a small reduction there of 20,000. We did not do the full reduction of removing all of those cameras since they cover the parking lots and also all the walking paths coming from both Washington Street and East Street. And there was another item here for a reduction of exterior card readers, and that was probably a small dollar value, so that's something we're also not currently pursuing. Moving on to site. The first item is eliminating the cast in place stair that kind of comes down from the main entry. You've got the kind of the island in the middle that you kind of pass through, and then there's the cast in place stairs that go down to the playing fields. We're removing that and leaving only the accessible walkway paths instead of having the stair coming down. Eliminating all the concrete pavers for the outside learning classroom that is in between classroom A and B. That is a $27,500 savings. Eliminating the vehicle charging stations and only the infrastructure to install them later. That was a $25,000 savings. Removing the exterior basketball court, which is kind of tucked up on the back of the hill behind the cafeteria. We did not pursue that item. The next item was going from larger tree to smaller trees at the start of planting, changing them from 3-inch to 1.5 or 2-inch was $11,000 savings. Next one is very similar for smaller shrubs, going from 3 to 5 gallon to a 1 gallon, which is $4,500 savings. Deleting the landscape granite curbing, which is kind of in that entry plaza as you cut across from the playing fields to the main entry. That was a $22,000 savings. Installing metal bollards in lieu of granite. We had a bunch of granite bollards kind of at that same entry plaza. Changing them to metal was a $55,500 savings. Deleting the salvage log seating and stumps, which was on the east side of classroom wing A, kind of in another one of those kind of outdoor learning spaces, was an $80,000 savings. Deleting the precast benches around the site was a $45,000 savings. Deleting the picnic tables and chairs around the site, which was a $50,000 savings. I believe those are all the ones that were outside the cafeteria in that plaza space. Deleting the seating cubes, which were, I think, tucked around in the outdoor learning areas and also in the courtyard between the auditorium and the chorus room, was a $7,500 savings. Deleting the exterior whiteboard that was at the outdoor teaching classroom was a $2,500 savings. Deleting the bistro chairs was a $10,000 savings. Changing the fence. This was the fence that is separating the property kind of between the drive coming in from East Street and the neighboring properties to the north. I think we had spec'd the vinyl fencing that was used in one of the other projects in town. Reducing that to a different style of vinyl fence was a $50,000 savings. Installing concrete curbing in lieu of granite is a $100,000 savings. That is one of the items that we have to discuss further with the DPW in town to make sure that is okay maintenance-wise. And then utilizing crushed red gravel for structural fill was a $40,000 savings. Two other items here that we did not proceed with: deleting the raised speed table. The granite bollards are actually out and replacing it with striping. We kept that for safety reasons, since that's one of the main areas where the kids will be crossing to the main entry. So we did not pursue that item. And then we also did not pursue deleting the amphitheater and courtyard outside of the cafeteria adjacent to the playground or the basketball courts. That was another item that we did not pursue, which was $137,350. Any questions on security and site?
Bear in mind, everybody, we don't need to vote on this until the 9th. Does anybody have any questions?
Can I go back to, I was looking at the part where you were talking about taking out storage from the general classrooms. And it said you were going to take out one cabinet from each of the classrooms, what does that leave the classroom with?
So right now, I believe we've got a teacher wardrobe and 2 general storage cabinets in all the general classrooms. So it'll leave them with 1 teacher wardrobe and 1 general storage instead of having 2 general storage cabinets. Plus some basin wall cabinets as well.
Okay. I understand we have to go through this exercise. I just see the capital budget list getting bigger and bigger because a lot of these things are things we're going to be asking for from a different source of funding. I think. Suppose there's a group that can fundraise for us. Does that play into any of these decisions?
So this is a very tricky issue with MSBA. So MSBA would deem that if you get any additional grant money or that third-party funding, that they would deduct $1 by dollar that you receive from the third party, if it's not town fund already.
I see. Okay.
So we, generally speaking, we do not recommend that because that doesn't gain you any, your total available dollar does not increase by anything. If you were, but if you were to take it out of the project and then fundraise to purchase them, then that's perfectly reasonable.
Do it separately. I see.
Nancy, I was going to say along those lines, I'm just thinking like the bleachers are a very expensive item. And I'm just thinking, you know, with sports being as important as they are, that would be an item that I would think would be good for fundraising if we take it out. And my suggestion would be to put some stuff back in like storage and natural light. Because when we surveyed the community, natural light was very important. So some of the structural items that we can't put back in later, I just wonder if we'd be better off taking out something. Another item along those lines, not for fundraising, but like the courts VCT in the bathroom, I'd need to hear a real justification from, I know Donnie for maintenance, but that's $120,000. And I personally don't care about bathroom floors. I do care about decals that make the building look pretty and really, you know, make the building special. So that's what I'm thinking about. Some of these items that are bigger and we can put some lights back in, natural light.
So as far as the bleachers, I feel very strongly that they need to be in there. Having been through, this will be my 3rd bleacher discussion in the town of Walpole since I've been here. This is going to come back on capital, and this goes back to Nancy's comments. And whenever we do bleachers, it's going to probably be, I think there's 200,000 penciled in there. It's probably going to be 300,000 or 400,000. I did the bleachers at the football field years and years ago. We just did these bleachers at the high school. That's one of the ones I feel very strongly we need to remain in there. And Donnie can speak to his desire with the bathroom. I know it's easy to cut in certain places, but bleachers I feel really strong about leaving in.
I don't think you can really privately fundraise for much of this stuff because the MSBA just is not going to want, I mean, maybe planting shrubs around the building or something like that, or outdoor picnic tables, but I just don't think they're going to support. Granted, we could hide it from them, I suppose, but fundraising, they just don't want rich towns fundraising when poor towns can't, and feel as if the MSBA is subsidizing that. So.
One item that I should inform everybody is that we're still vetting unfortunately, the technology consultant is out of town, so we need to vet the technology budget and what's included and what can we afford to move things around. So this item is not final, and then it could potentially we might be able, there might be some possibility there. We just don't know enough information as of now. So I just want to inform the committee of the status on that, the network switch. And obviously we can continue the discussion, but I could just simply sort of quickly go over what the bottom line is that if you add up the highlighted item here, that it comes out to be almost $2.9 million. And then when you add a markup, then we have a 3.1 $1 million. And when you and then the where we started is 96.2. And then if you add in the additional funds that's available from the central to fund for the central kitchen equipment at $350,000, which the districts believe that is viable, then we do meet the, we're just right around, we're just slightly off of the what's available in terms of money. So we need to do, so effectively that a different way to put it is that if we take anything off the yellow, the highlighted item, then we have to find somewhere some similar amount going back in order to maintain the dollar amount for this round. And we're not seeking for a vote today, just simply want to have the discussion and then find out from the committee what are the priority and then what are the concerns.
Thanks, Ken. So our next order of business is
Mark, I think Jen wrote, did you have your hand raised? I wasn't sure.
Yes, I mean, I think this is like a very important discussion, just in terms of, I don't want to rush through this because, you know, once we decide on these items, and, you know, I still stand by what I said earlier, that we should try to keep the structure of the building intact as much as possible and in line with what the community asked for, which was natural light. I think the site areas where we got rid of things there, to me, that's a great place because, you know, bushes will grow, you know, to the extent that we can get rid of some of those things. Like I said, I still prefer, you know, I don't care much about the bathroom floor as much as I do some of the educational items, and, you know, changing the studs seemed to me like that was a good big ticket item. The PVC roofing, reducing the tile by 30%, that's a big item. Theater lighting, I would be okay with removing sinks, but I really do not feel that we should be getting rid of a lot of the windows. I would keep those in. I would get rid of, like I said, the bathroom was 120,000. Switching the floor, I would prefer to change a bathroom floor and, you know, put other items back in for that 120. I understand that Jim likes bleachers, and there might be a reason to do it that way. I still think that's an item that could be added in later. And my preference is to keep in, like I said, items that are structural that you can't add later. So that's just the way I would look at it. The network switches, I hope that comes in high like that. Hydroponics, for instance, I would put hydroponics back in. The canopies, that really, to me, seems like you're getting rid of a whole design element. Decals, I would also not get rid of that. And that's the way I would look at it, is just looking at items that you're able to put in later that are not going to be that difficult to change, but items like that thing around the outside of the building that adds some interest to the building. I'd have to see buildings that didn't have it, but that was one of the design elements when we toured the schools we looked at, and that was good. I know tile, there's a certain height that you could put the tile in that really helps with maintenance, because you don't want kids with the backpacks banging up against the walls. We talked about this 30% reduction. To me, you know, if we were going from floor to ceiling, we could certainly reduce some, but I would just want to make sure that we're not reducing so much that we're painting the buildings as a result. So I would just look at it with that in mind. And those are some of the items that to me seem like easy places to cut, and put some of the educational items like hydroponics back in.
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else?
Yeah, let me try this. I'm trying to understand how we get from here to 2 weeks from now. So, you know, like a number of us have thoughts, like maybe this, maybe that. What's the process that's going to get us to a decision 2 weeks from now? Because some of it is like Jen just mentioned. If I knew what a 30% reduction in the tile would be, I would know whether I like it or dislike it. So I think and there's a bunch of places where it says to be determined. So like, what's the process that's going to get us to a decision that we can vote on in 2 weeks?
I'll start off by the to be determined items that we will be working with the team to try to get an answer, and then vet it to see whether it is real or not. Because as Matt had explained, that some of the items that it turned out to be that it's not that real as a reduction. And then in terms of the tile reduction, that I think that that was a long discussion about that. We think that by reducing 30%, we can still give you perhaps not 100% of the where we want it to be, and then but then it is still something that would allow you to be able to operate a school without too much impact in terms of the functionality of the tile, in terms whether it's in the toilets or in the hallway. And so that's where the recommendation from Tpo, and then and that's also the reason why we did not go to 50%, the additional 200 and something thousand dollars that is available if we really have no choice. And it is, and then so that's right now that we're trying to tread we're trying to. A lot of things, a lot of items on here are not something that, let's put it this way, they were designed in here for a reason. And then so all of these are not that easy. Some are the only easy one is the roof substitution because of the change of the market condition. And then so that every single one of these line items have some amount of impact to the project, and then that we're sort of trying to choose the lesser of the two evils, more or less is the way I put it. So we would, Brian,
yeah, can I just add to that, Chin? So Nancy, I mean, without going on forever tonight, I mean, part of the conversation tonight was to ask some of these questions. So if you have specific questions now, the tile, like Chin just said, the 30% is not, it's reduced, if it's 4 feet in this area, we're reducing it to 3 feet, or if there's a part of the building that doesn't really need to have tile to the ceiling or something like that, that's out of the way. That's what Tpo is trying to look for. But if you have more questions like that, you could ask it now. If others have questions looking through this list over the next week, I mean, please email them through Mark to the team, and we'll get answers back to you if you have questions on them. But the goal was really to try to, like I said, nip around the edges as much as possible. There is going to come a point where we have to prioritize, and I guess this committee is going to have to agree on what's in and what's out. And part of that is we are at a point now between now and the next design estimate of, some of these things need to get drawn into the building now from a structural or from an exterior perspective. So if you make the decision and it gets out now, it's not that easy to put back in, whereas some of them, like putting the tile back in, is really easy to do at the end and or during construction. So those are some of the things that this committee is going to have to think about. But at the next meeting, the goal would be have all of your answers to your questions already answered, whether it's tonight or through email, and be able to come to this meeting with, okay, this is what we think should go in and this is what we think should go out. And then hopefully we have some additional information in the next couple of days that could potentially free up some additional funds that makes that decision a lot easier, because some things can go back in because we've picked up some money on some of those TBD things.
Okay.
But right now, this is where we're at.
So you're going to let us know sometime as soon as possible about some of the things that you're still looking into, and we'll email you with questions. I'm interested in what we would save if we eliminated all the lockers. I'm not sure that I feel like we should do it or not, but I'd like to know what that would save, because it's another non-educational piece, and it might be worth considering.
Didn't we have that price in there?
No, we didn't have that price, Brian, because we figured we were already doing the VE for the tile. And once we take the lockers out, you end up putting tile back in at that location.
That's right.
So it wasn't a big cost saving just from our early estimates from Fontaine.
Yeah, so Nancy, in that particular instance, so if you imagine if you have a row of lockers down the hallway, you take the lockers off, you now have an exposed wall that you'd want to put tile or something to keep the wall from getting marked up. So that's kind of how it's priced. If you want to have an exposed wall, but then that gets beaten up and it's a maintenance issue, then there
Right.
could be
No,
potential savings. Yep.
I forgot he had mentioned that. Yep. And I do agree with Jim Johnson about the bleachers. I mean, we're going to look, this is a sports community, and we are going to look like idiots if we make a gym that doesn't have bleachers in it. That doesn't mean that we can't. I mean, Walpole Youth Basketball has been so generous to us. So maybe we have to have a side conversation with them to say, will you help us out? I don't know, but because these are tough decisions, but we need, when that building opens, there needs to be bleachers in there. My opinion.
Anybody else before I add a
Yeah,
comment?
I'd like to make a request.
Yeah.
I'd like to find out what the savings would be if we went with just a standard lighting package rather than the proposed extravagant lighting package with the control system. I'd like to see what the difference in cost between those two options would be.
Right.
I'll work with Matt on getting an answer on that, on the lighting potential saving. Yes.
If I could add a comment as well, I think of the positive side here. We have good-sized teaching spaces, amply good-sized teaching spaces with abundant natural light. So to me, those are kind of cornerstone items. And another thing, I think in terms of aesthetics, if a building takes longer to get dirty or is easier to clean, again, those types of materials in terms of tiles, that can make a difference as well. So that's just my 2 cents. Anybody else?
I think Ben has the hand. You got Boris and Ben
Boris,
has the hands up.
Boris? Boris, please.
Yeah. Yes. So first of all, I want to just say that I appreciate TAP's diligence in going through each individual item and making sure that the items that they're touching and going through and recommending from a change standpoint are not items that are gonna deface the building and make it challenging for the students to keep learning appropriately and bringing this building into the 21st century essentially. So I really appreciate their due diligence in this. The biggest question that I have is, so this is the second iteration where we're going through a revision from a line item standpoint to figure out what we can cut and what needs to change in order for us to meet a particular budgetary item. I guess this is a question more towards Brian and the Compass team. Are we envisioning any other iterations of this happening? Obviously, we know what the landscape looks like from a economic standpoint at this point, and that these prices are very they're fluctuating consistently, right? So what are we looking at? The reason why I'm asking you this is because are we splitting hairs in not cutting a particular item right now when we're going to have to cut it later on because another iteration of this is going to come about where additional cuts are going to be required?
Ryan or Jim, you want to address that?
Yeah. So as a process that we are at 60% CD, and then we will be going through the process again at 90% CD. And the whole point of doing this is to reduce surprises when you get to the point of building your GMP for the project. And then in the 90% set, we will know, we will have, because we plan to go out for actually bidding on a number of items at the same time. So that give you more certainty, and then therefore that the so-called design contingency and escalation contingency will go way down. And then and we will go through another process at that point, yes, that we will have to do that. And then after that, then the last set will be the GMP process, and then we need to bring the project in on budget at that point. But then at that point that we will be open to looking at a different options. So potentially that we in some projects that we actually start considering reducing the construction contingency if that become necessary. So that is that's a possibility. And then, but we do have 2 more cycles to go through before we have a signed contract.
Any follow-up, Boris?
Okay, so 2 more cycles potentially of cost cutting that we might be encountering down the road.
Yeah, so Boris, so what I'll add to that is we have 1 more estimate that we're going to do in 90% CDs, which is going to be, I think, October timeframe roughly, where we'll go through this process again. Hopefully the market is stabilized and we can maybe potentially not have to carry a further escalation cost. Like right now we have $2 million in escalation. The other part is that we're actually going to bid the trade contractors in late December and January, where they're actually going to submit bids for things like HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and painting. So until that point, we have an estimate in hand, right? If those bids come in high in January, so to speak, then we're faced with, okay, now we have actual real numbers that we have to accept from a trade contractor, and we might have to revisit at that point. Just like if you were in a traditional bid environment where you didn't have a CM on board now and you opened the whole project cost at the end of the design phase and you're over budget, you have to figure out what to do. The advantage that we have is that we actually still have time to finalize a GMP, make some other decisions based on the information we have from the trade contractor and potentially pull that together and still come in on budget. But there will be 2 other points for sure that we're going to revisit this, 1 at 90% CDs and 1 after we get the trade bids in prior to finalizing a GMP.
Anything else, Boris?
Okay. Yeah, one final follow-up to that. Is there another contingent list of items that is kind of the next set, I guess, to be reviewed if an additional cuts need to be made?
In addition to what's not been recommended tonight or whatever this committee ends up referring.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
A couple of the things that we're looking into already, plus, obviously looking at the fiber mesh in the slabs as Jack recommended. There are a couple of things that we're looking at that haven't been fully vetted out yet that might be a possibility. And again, the goal would be to come back at the next meeting and have some of those updates to potentially save some of these things on the list and replace them with, things that are a little bit more palatable. But no, there's not a whole other list of other things out there without really getting into affecting the building. I think we've gleaned through this pretty extensively.
Appreciate the input.
Thanks, Boris. Ben, you were next.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Who was it that asked the question about the light cost comparison?
Donnie.
Okay. In terms of the, I would echo what people have said in terms of trying to find a balance, and it's kind of the name of the game, right? Finding a balance between retaining things like curb appeal and visuals and the feel of the space, which certainly are important to not only to educators and students, but important to residents and folks who are helping to pay for this building. There's aspects of this that we don't want to make it a concrete box with nothing around it. So I think as we get down to brass tacks on some of these, I really appreciate Donnie's input on these things like the lighting cost and the tiles and whatnot. But I think it might be important to be able to, explain or put our fingers on some of the actual costs related to that. So, for example, I trust Donnie when he says, well, we really want these tiles. These are the better tiles. I'm okay with that 100%. But if we are talking about cutting some of these other items that are going to be deemed important, and remembering what Boris just said, that it's likely that we have at least 1 more round, possibly 2 more to go on this, we're going to need to be able to put some numbers to that in terms of, okay, well, what are we saving by going with this tile? Or another example would be, Brian, what you discussed. having the tile up the wall, and I believe that was in the hallways. And so when I saw the 30% reduction, I took that to mean that 30% less of the hallways will have tile up them. And then Brian, you had said, well, it actually could mean that the tile is going up 30% less high in all of the hallways. So regardless, and we don't need to get into that now, I think that those are actual costs that we're going to need to understand to say, yeah, you know, it's a huge cost putting the tile up in the hallways. What is that saving us in the long run in terms of maintenance, in terms of wear and tear, and is that really reasonable? And you know, I don't know if we're talking about actually reducing it down the wall. I mean, what does 2 feet of tile up a wall get you anyway in terms of that? Because nobody's going to be hitting their backpack, you know, 1 or 2 feet up the wall. It's going to be 4 feet up the wall. So we are going to be getting down to some of the details here, and I think it's important to understand what we are going to be saving. You know, what taxpayers are going to be saving, what we're getting residents for some of their bang for their buck for these. And, you know, there's going to be pain all the way around, right? The people that use the building, the educators, students, staff, building maintenance facilities, everyone's going to give a little bit. That's the nature of this value engineering process we're going through. And it stinks, nobody likes it, but every project does it. And there isn't a project that likes it. So I guess I would just, my ask then specifically is, if we are going to be saying that some of these are saving us money or work in the long term, that we're able to put maybe a dollar to that or something that's less subjective and more objective, so that we can all feel that we're making a reasonable decision.
Thanks, Ben. Nancy, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I was really glad to hear Donnie Anderson chime in, because there are just things that, Donnie, that you know about that I have no clue about. So, you know, I think we should listen to some of the things that Donnie's bringing forward too. So I'd be interested if you have others, Donnie. That's it.
Yes. So we could, has anybody looked at the possibility, if we can't afford to put tile on the walls in the hallway, which would be ideal, have you looked at the cost of putting the PVC sheets that can be quite decorative and still very durable?
Donnie, that I had a conversation with Matt about the possibility of using linoleum up the wall. That has been done in some schools when budget is really an issue. And so we will, I will talk, I have to talk to Matt about how we can manage that.
It's just an option that we should at least consider before we go
Understood.
right off the paint.
Understood.
Donnie, do you mean like an FRP panel, Donnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, FRP, PVC.
Okay.
There's a lot of materials out there, and some of them are quite decorative. I just put some plain ones up at the Elm Street School because of the young kids with their backpacks were destroying the walls out in the hallway. And it actually dressed up the whole hallway. And I know it's not quite as expensive as going with a tile wall.
So it's Chad Bergeron here with Fontaine. Yeah, it's an Ackerman product. It's more like what you see in like a nursing home. It's a system more or less. It's not like an FRP like you see in a janitor's closet. It's, you know, it is decorative. It goes up in sheets, just like Donnie said. But it's, you know, it's more robust than just your standard FRP, and we can definitely take a look into. You know, we can definitely take a look into what that cost is versus the tile.
As a matter of fact, Brian, that's what they put in the bathrooms at the senior center.
Okay, we will look into that.
Jen, you had a hand?
Yeah, my thought was sort of along the lines of what Nancy was asking. How do we get from where we are today to 2 weeks from now feeling comfortable to take a vote? I am wondering about a working group as some of the, you know, numbers are coming in and there are priorities. We've heard kind of some of the thoughts people had in terms of easy fixes, you know, like we said, the PVC roofing for one, studs possibly. So there seems to me like in my head, I have like, as we were going, I jotted things down and easier fixes. But I do still have questions on some of these where I really would like to talk more with Donnie and hear his expertise. You know, like I said, the bathroom, I'm not saying I have more knowledge of these things. I just still have questions. And I'm just wondering about having some meetings in the interim where we can get our questions answered and kind of prioritize some of these items so that when we get to the next meeting, you know, and as the numbers are coming in, we can start kind of moving things around and just giving more input, maybe checking out a building that has these PVC, the option we just talked about instead of tiles, if that saves a lot of money. I'd want to look at some of those things before we decide. So that would be my preference, would be to have some sort of working group in the interim that can kind of prioritize some of this.
Thanks, Jen. Jack, you had a hand?
Yeah, kind of along the same line as Nancy and Jen are talking about. We have to make a decision in 2 weeks, okay? There seems to be a lot of questions. One thing I'm going to say right up front is we're not going to get 100% agreement on 100% of the items. So there's going to have to be some discussion. There's going to be some compromise. We also have another bite at the apple at the 90%, and we may have to do something after the fact once we get things back from the bids. So if we make a decision in 2 weeks, which we have to, we may have the opportunity, or we will have the opportunity to refine those decisions. I won't say reconsider, but refine those decisions as we get later into the process and the costs come out a little bit more accurate. My point is that I think in 2 weeks, whether we have a working group or we have emails or text messages or gatherings at the town hall, I don't think we're going to get a lot more questions answered in the next 2 weeks. Okay, beside filling in some costs that are TBD right now, and a couple of things that Donnie said. So I think that we need to keep in mind, one, not everybody's going to agree on everything, and two, we get another bite at the apple farther down the road, which we can use to refine. What we need to do is make sure that after we vote in 2 weeks, we don't just put this on the back burner for 2 months and then go ahead and have another 2-week rush at this. So I think that we're not going to get a lot more information in the next couple of weeks that'll allow us to do anything more than basically kind of solidify our position on a particular thing. That's my feeling.
Thanks, Jack. Nancy?
No, I'm done.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
All right, question. First off, how do I put that hand up there everybody's got?
Reactions at the bottom.
Really? I don't know if I got that. I got an old computer. Anyway, well.
Took me 6 tries, Jack. I couldn't find it either.
Okay, I'll have to try some other time. First is, yeah, what Jack had said, and I've been through this for years, and I'm gonna tell you right now from experience, you got to gear up early on. You get all the lists out there, and you vote the list, but it doesn't mean you're voting everybody off the island. You start at this one, we all agree, boom, and you work your way up, because you're going to need it. Because what's going to happen is you're going to come to a point where it's too late for some of the stuff and you're over budget. So if you get the list out early, meaning, yeah, everybody agrees to, maybe half of us agree to, now we'll leave that to the end. But you're going to have to do a deep dive on all this, because when you get to December, it's too late at that point for a lot of this stuff. You're going to be talking pennies. I mean, if you change the paint color, if you change the tile, at that point, when you get to after real bids come in, it's kind of like the ship has sailed. So if you do it up front like this, at least you get it in order and everybody can understand. And I think Jack said you don't put it on the back burner either, but everybody's got to understand you got to start somewhere. So to me, when I'm going to do it, is I look at the stuff that doesn't affect anything, meaning a stud's a stud to stud. You put drywall on either side, who cares? That's a no-brainer. So if that doesn't go 15-0, there's something wrong with us. And then you finally work your way down the list. So that's what I would do. My recommendation to everybody in the committee is just go through some of the list here we have tonight and say, yeah, okay, not a big deal, doesn't affect us, and slowly work your way up to the final one. It's like you're going to dig your heels in. But that way it'll make it go quicker, I think, for the ratings. It'll help Tpo and Compass and Fontaine on this. So simplest thing is throw the first guy off the island and then work your way up. That's all
Yeah,
I have.
Jack, I agree with what you and Jack had said. I think the suggestion between now and the next 2 weeks, because I agree that there's not going to be a lot of time to like go see these things. And we will have some additional pricing coming in that hopefully again precludes having to make some of these decisions, because we're going to take some of these other things that maybe pricing is a little bit more palatable. But I would agree that everyone should go through the list and highlight the ones that they have an issue with, or would like to see saved, however they can be saved, right? And then those are the ones that we'd have to talk about the next meeting. We won't have to talk about the other, based on tonight's conversation, doesn't seem like we have to talk about 75 or 80% of these things, but it could be wrong. And then that way you just focus on the ones that we need to have a discussion about, and the committee can vote. And again, if we have additional information that we don't have to vote on some of them, we won't have to vote on them.
And I will recommend that the committees, that if you can say send, whether it's through Mark or just feedback to the team, so that both in terms of, okay, for the purpose of this, we have to arrive at the same bottom line at the end of the day. So in some way, this is a zero-sum game. And so if you say, okay, I'm keeping X, then we will have to then, what else are we willing to entertain in terms of taking off?
So I would suggest, between now and ideally next Tuesday, if not sooner, get any questions over to the team, copy Mark, just don't copy the whole committee on them. And then we'll review them, get any answers back to you. And hopefully by then we'll also have some of this other feedback, which as soon as we get the updated pricing, we'll send an updated list, which obviously might knock some things off of this list altogether, which would be a good thing. But also bring some other decision points, things like the lighting. If there's a potential savings there, what does the committee want to do with lighting? So we'll work on that in the meantime. But in the meantime, if you can go through and make your list of what's kind of the issues you have and what you're okay with, then that would be a big help.
Brian, quick suggestion. Brian,
yeah. I'm
going to make your life easier for all of us. If you'd send out the list and just number it, okay? This is my suggestion. It'll cut down a lot of it, and have a rating system: 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being we don't care, or 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. 0 means whoever gets the most, and compile it for the committee to see what ends up with the most points and least points. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We'd have to compile all that from everybody.
Yeah, but if I send it to you, you're just going to take a list and you just fill in a spreadsheet for 15 people across, and it's done. Rather than sitting here for another 3 hours, worrying about, something, a doormat. That's all. I think it's speed alone.
Yeah, we could do it that way. What I was thinking about Jack was if everyone could just kind of email and just kind of say these are the 1 or 3 or 5 things that I have an issue with that we really need to discuss. I want to have a vote on it. I think that'd probably be easier. We'd have a list of, hopefully a list of a dozen or so that we really need to discuss, and the other ones are kind of everyone agrees with.
All right, then do it that way, that everybody should just send in what they're digging their heels in, and if they don't dig their heels in, they don't care.
Yeah, and the other point is without any additional funding, again, kind of moving forward with the assumption that we don't have any additional items that we can cut for additional funding, whatever you decide on, we have to come up with that $3.2 million number, right? So you're going to trade something for something else, relatively, basically speaking. But we'll discuss that at the next meeting. But if everyone just get their questions out as soon as possible, if they're not sure what something means, or if we didn't explain it clearly enough tonight. And then also just what would be good is if you can get your list of these are the ones I think we need further discussion on and a vote. We'll kind of see which ones are on multiple people's lists and kind of go from there. Those would be the topic of discussion.
Jack Fisher, you want to hand?
I just want to further support what Brian and Jack just said. I think what we need to do is make sure that we all understand that the list that we were talking about tonight is the baseline list. And what it is the responsibility of each one of the committee members to identify those items that they have questions on and bring them up ASAP to Brian and Chin so that we can go ahead, so they can go ahead and answer these questions. But the baseline document is what we've started talking about tonight. So, identify those issues that you have a problem with. They'll get back to us with answers, and then we can go ahead and have a very limited discussion on the ones that are outstanding in 2 weeks, and maybe get through a meeting in under 3 hours.
Thanks, Jack.
We're only
All
at
right,
two,
our-
Jack. We're only at two.
Our next item of business is building finishes and 3-week look ahead, tab A.
Chin, you gonna share the screen on
Yep.
those items? Okay.
Well, do, give me a
So
second.
I'll start talking through the materials and finishes. So we presented the finishes and new renderings to the working group. We dropped off all of the boards with the updated renderings and some of the materials on it. And also all the sample boards for the masonry. And there's another image, if you go to the next one, there's a bunch of trays that have all the different samples for the flooring and the carpeting and accent paint colors and wood colors and tile and everything else. So those are all at town hall. We left them in Patrick's office. He was talking about putting them in a conference room so you could set all the boards up and see the samples. So I'm not sure where they ended up. I don't know if anyone on the call knows where they're at, but they are there for you to review. And then we will be presenting these to you the next working group on the 9th. Then moving on to the 3-week look ahead. Tomorrow we have the first construction meeting along with the trade pre-qual meeting that Kate previously talked about. And again, we're just continuing on with the VE coordination and also with the packaging of the 60% MSBA submission and ER2. Kind of the same thing for the following week, at the first week of August. We also have a on-site meeting for temp fiber and electrical on-site, kind of following discussions we had previously for reworking the temp work on site for getting it rerouted around the footprint of the new building. We also have a meeting on Thursday with the MSBA to review the design status of the project. Moving on to the following week, we have the next building committee that we previously discussed on the 9th, and we'll be continuing to work on all the packages previously discussed. Again, the weekly job meetings continue for the construction site on each Wednesday of the week. Finally, we're supposed to issue the MSBA 60% CD submission and ER2 on the 15th. And once that goes out, we will start rolling on to the next packages, which is ER3 and the 90% CD estimate submission. And we have another working group meeting the following week, and we'll also be identifying any changes that need to take place via addenda or bidder questions that come in for ER2. And that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Matt, I think those materials, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, are right outside your office. All those materials that you just saw, I think they're still there. So
okay,
they're still there.
Okay.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, thanks, Jack. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion for Mr. Fisher, second for Ms. Gallivan. We pull the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz. Jen,
Sorry, my space bar wasn't working. Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night now.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
thank you.